Lucienne, thank you very, very much for joining me today. It's my pleasure to have you here. As you know, I invited you along for this interview where I'm interviewing different entrepreneurs, business owners, executives around the topic of coaching and what it's really taken for them to reach the sort of performance levels and success that they've achieved in their business career or life so far. As you know, my name's David Grieve. I'm a certified high performance coach and the founder and managing director of UCAN Group, where we help individuals, business owners, entrepreneurs and executives really find balance by reaching heightened and sustained levels of performance, potential, but ultimately happiness in all of life's arenas, whether it be business and career, family, friends, relationships. I look at that at a very holistic viewpoint. But today, I'm more interested, and particularly interested in your thoughts and really your story around what it's taken you to reach your level of success in your life and business so far. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with me and our audience a little bit about you and your story on your journey so far, please.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me. Lovely introduction. That is really nice. Thank you. So a bit about my story is that really I have been inadvertently coaching, mentoring since I started my teaching career, my career in education, without really knowing it, without ever really knowing what coaching was, knowing what mentoring was, but not knowing what coaching was, and discovering it through my my displeasure with how formal structures or institutions are supposedly supporting people from getting from A to B. So it was through research, understanding where my frustrations were in why I was very high performing, very astute, very intelligent, climbed very quickly, but seemingly just didn't have the foundations that I needed to trust my gut, to not be constantly worried about what other people thought of me, to, you know, there was real passion and drive, but there was something missing. And I was seeing that in the people that I worked with as well, and the people that I mentored and that I at the time guided or may have been coaching and didn't really realize it. So it wasn't until I've been driven by frustration probably my entire life, by things not working the way that I would like them to work, and by really channeling that frustration for wanting change for better. And that meant things like leaving a seemingly happy marriage, leaving a very good profession, changing things about my life that I wasn't happy with, even though I probably could have been quite happy with them, because I was frustrated by how it wasn't how I expected things to be, even though there was nothing massively wrong with what was going on. So I came to coaching, to answer your question, with a frustration about how things were not working with the people that I was working with, whether that was students or the people that I managed directly, or whether that was myself, and it being a whole new world that I didn't understand. And stepped into, well, I handed in a resignation for the job that I had without anything to go to, and stepped into this world of expert speakers and mentorship programs, and really got a lot of benefit from being around people who were already doing successfully what I had been doing without even really realizing it. Did a lot of work on myself, hired a coach, and joined a mastermind program, and that is what catapulted me, I suppose, to where I am now. My frustration then became that I was almost heralded as a bit of a poster girl for being a really, really successful startup business, rather than the mission and the vision that I had to help the people that I now work with. So just to kind of put a little bit of substance to what I've just said,
yes,
I left as a frustrated female professional who had a nervous breakdown and then went back to work, whose career was her identity, became a mother, became very frustrated with how society saw me and my opinions, and then started a business where I wanted to change the face of education. But what happened was people who were like me came towards me for my support instead.
Yeah.
And so the natural organic development of my business actually became about me supporting frustrated female executives mainly, because they can afford my coaching. And I've been able to build what I have as a membership, which is a very affordable route into coaching, quite generic, but means that I tick that box that I have to serve a community who can't necessarily afford the one-to-one coaching that I offer my executives. So it's been purely driven by frustration, and I am so glad that I have come to the knowledge that I have about coaching and mentoring in the way that I have, because I really feel like I am wholly and fully in alignment with what it does for people, rather than trying to believe that it will help. I
It'll
know
just work out.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, if you don't mind, when you say you engaged in the coach, what did the coach bring for you at that point? You know, what made you reach out or decide that getting a coach was the right thing to do?
So I engaged a coach probably prematurely, believing that I needed help with one particular area of my life, and that wasn't actually what I needed. So it was a good experience, it was a formative experience, but it's not what I needed. And I felt quite frustrated that I'd paid the money that I'd paid and I hadn't necessarily got what I wanted to get out of it. And that was due to my naivety in not really coming to look for a coach, having actually done the prep work that I needed to do on myself to understand what it was that I need. And that's actually part my job, and part the coach's job is to work through, well, actually, I'm not sure that what you specifically need is what you've come to me for, but I do know people who would be able to help you and support you in those specific skills. And I think that is why accreditation, knowledge, congruence, and that real desire to serve people is far more important than wanting to have a profit-making business, because profit will only be made as a coach if you work with integrity and you are referring people who you know they need something slightly different to what you offer.
That's right. I mean, the financial part is the byproduct of the service and the impact that you're making, really, as a fully engaged coaching enterprise that really wants to make a difference. So if that was the case, then, in identifying that at that point that particular coach or service wasn't the right thing for you at that point in your journey, then what would you say has kept you on that drive? I know you said that the drive was the sort of frustration, but what's helped you keep the focus and find the balance in your life? Because you're obviously, you're a mother, you're an extraordinary person, you're a successful businesswoman, you're helping other frustrated businesswomen and executives find their balance and their direction and coach them into that next level that they're looking for. So what would you say has kept you with that focus and finding that balance in your life? Because that's holistically where I really am interested in.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I feel like I didn't really do your previous question too much justice, but what I will say is that as I'm learning about myself, being driven by frustration and wanting the world to be a better place, what that did was made me even more compelled to ensure that the people that I worked with and what I provided for people was in alignment with what was needed. Because I knew that, so I'm doing a doctorate in coaching and mentoring. I know that coaching, when done effectively, is transformative. And that our education system, which we expect to be the foundational thing that creates who we are is actually very lacking. And I don't believe that education stops at the age of 18. I believe it needs to continue.
Does it ever stop?
But we seem to have this, in this country at least, this vision of we do our GCSEs, we do our A levels, and we go into the world and we are formed.
Yeah.
And that's not what happens. I've learned more about myself in my late 20s and early 30s than I have at any other point in my life.
I've learned more about myself in my late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah, and so it's fascinating, isn't it? Because the worth, the value of understanding who you are and understanding your potential is priceless. So you can't put money on that. Yeah. So I knew that coaching is an incredible way of living a life that you love and that you want to live, to tap into that. I saw it with the students that I was working with at A level in my mentorship group who were performing much better through interventions. And I just didn't lose faith in the fact that it could be great. So I kind of had that experience with my first coach, and then this next question that you've asked me, I just held on to that faith that there was somebody out there, that I probably hadn't done my due diligence in who I needed to work with. And I really started to investigate who would be the best person to work with, and what did I actually need, what was I really trying to achieve, which is when I then joined the mastermind that I was part of. And that was great for me because I actually couldn't afford it, so I was driven by the need to pay for that, which was supporting me in my drive to generate more business, even though I actually feel a little bit unhappy about that now. And I wasn't able to afford it, but I valued it so much that I really strived to make that work. And I was surrounded by people who actually not on the level that I was at within the mastermind, but the people who were running the mastermind. That's what I was interested in. I was like, these people are bringing people together. They are supporting communities of like-minded people, and they are developing them. And this is what I want to be a part of. And it was phenomenal. It was great for me because it stepped me into a world that was away from education. Really, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
So how do you find then? Because like for me, when you said about releasing that potential, you touched a bone with me, because that's essentially what my drive is in coaching. My backstory is kind of similar to you, quite similar actually, where I was a real professional overseas working in project management, massive companies doing really well, but really, really frustrated with the infrastructure and where I was. And my coaching journey, only when I engaged in a coach, which was expensive, and it was a big investment for me. But like you, I identified that I needed something or somebody to help me pull out where it was, because I was really frustrated. Like I woke up one morning and realised that I did not know the answer to why I was so frustrated. And then, so I think when somebody gets to that point, where do people reach out to then? So for me, fortunately, I was quite, aware of coaching and the benefits, and I'd seen different types of coaches, whether it was business coaches or development people. But I latched onto this performance because for me, like you, I was a very high achiever. But in my life, I didn't feel like I was really performing. So to get to that level, that the coaching really took me out. But so for you, in your journey going through the mastermind and now being a full-time businesswoman and family, what do you do to keep that focus now and find that balance between everything that you're doing? Because there's a lot to be done, really, let's be honest.
Yeah. I have a great support network. Yeah. I have a really good support network. The men in my life who I've brought into my life have just been instrumental in supporting me. So my son's father, we were married for for a long time. We were together for a long time. He remains a very close friend of mine and supports me with our son, who is autistic, and just an incredible little human being. I mean, he's just amazing. He's 9 now. And my current partner and my partner and my son's father work together with me in such a good way that we are able to allow me to do what I need to do in my business. Jackson, my son, is able to be taken to school by the same person every day, picked up by the same person every day. We have a community infrastructure that works really well. Some people call it a blended family, but we're good friends and we work well together. But on top of that, I have found somebody, I have a coach and mentor who I really trust, respect, and admire. And that is because he taps something inside of me that is about me really understanding my self-worth. So part of the problem before, and I love the mastermind that I was with, it's been instrumental in me being getting to where I am before, but I was looking to other people to validate what I was doing, and I wasn't necessarily finding that strength within me to have that belief that I could do what I wanted to do. And that's what I found in this person that I work with now, and that's happened almost accidentally. So it's quite interesting how that has worked, but I trust and respect him so much that he is now my coach and mentor, and he allows me the space to trust myself, which is really fascinating, because I would have never thought that I didn't trust myself, but I clearly didn't. Everything that I've done up until now has been seeking validation or approval or strokes from others, whether it's the PhD or whatever it is, it's that rubber seal of approval. And when I look at the different facets of my life, I think that I'm a really quite boring individual. There are things that happen to me in my life that people say to me, "You're so inspiring." And I just don't understand. I really don't understand it, because actually the women that I work with, and when I speak to the women that I work with, there is nobody that I work with that doesn't have an inspiring story, that isn't inspirational in some way or another. But I wasn't valuing my own inspirational story, and now I own it, and I'm like, okay, I believe I'm quite boring, but other people see what I've done and they think it's great. That's fine. We'll go with that. That's all right. Whereas before I would be like, no, let's not talk about me and how I've done this. Let's just focus on you.
Well, it's so much easier to do that, isn't it? To put the focus on somebody else. But one of the roles that I really love about being a coach is showing people that. Is having them bring that out and then reflect it back upon them. Because, like you said, most people don't go around every day thinking about clarity and energy and their story and how well they've done and the struggles they've been through and how they achieve to get through them. Nobody walks around like contemplating all this or reflecting on it. But for me, the role that I play with a lot of my clients is really bringing that out and then flipping the mirror up and saying, look at you. Look at how remarkable you are being. So look at how much potential you have got to get to where you want to be. Because that's the blockage, isn't it? It's, we've got all the stuff that we've done, but we don't always think that we're good enough to then go and do all the things that we really want to do. That next step, find that voice, find that courage, get that clarity.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, and there's just so much that we could talk about here, but something that really sticks in my mind is a conversation I posted about this last week that I had with a Harvard student who had been following and liking my posts and had sent me a message. Now, I'm terrible at this is terrible for a coach to say, but the judgment that I have of people who come into my inbox is just phenomenal. It's often, I have a team who just delete anything that's sales pitchy or you know, and only forward to me something that they think is going to be relevant. And I actually went into my inbox, and this girl who had been commenting and posting on my posts appeared in my inbox, and she sent me a lovely message, and she had seen my transition from education into executive coaching and wanted to find out more. And I said, do you know what? I'm just going to set up a call with her. Like, she's a young girl. She's reached out to me. She doesn't want to tell me about how she can improve my business or, you know, all this other stuff. So I set up a call with her. And I spent most of the time talking, to be fair. She was asking me lots of questions. But that situation gave me something that I haven't had for a long time. A 19-year-old girl in the States studying, speaking to me and asking me questions about my transition and what I've done and how exciting it is, and, you know, where do you want it to go, and how did you get there, made me realize that I actually can be quite excited about where I'm going and what I'm doing. I don't have to just be, I was a leader in education and now I'm an executive coach and that's it. It's like, it's these inspirational things come from places that you don't quite expect them to come from as well, and that's given me real fuel. But she reached out to me because she was seeing examples of what I was doing with the women that I was working with. And I think that's really important. So you were talking about, you know, how we can flip and turn the mirror, and that is so important. You have camps of coaching where you can mentor, you can coach, you can instruct, you can advise. You've got like the pure coaching where you simply sit and ask questions, you don't pollute the space at all. But I think it's really important, coming back to what you were saying before about being in a space and flipping the mirror, that you're with somebody that you can allow to do that with you. That you establish that rapport, that you get that relationship going, you understand why you're there, and you allow them to call you out on your bullshit. You allow them to flip the mirror on you. You allow them to suggest something, and that is really, really important. I feel like I'm all over the place, but I'm just so...
No, that's good. This is what I want to. This is what we want to get to the core of, because it's understanding the really essentially the core of coaching and how the benefits come out of that. So in understanding that, then we have to see, well, how does sitting with a coach actually benefit me? Because most people, or the majority of people, would think, well, yeah, okay, fair enough, but I could probably just work through this myself. Right? But it's getting to the core of what is the real benefit of sitting with a coach. You know, do your research, make sure you get somebody who's concentrating in the area that you really need to develop, and like you said, don't just jump into somebody that's just going to take you on a journey that's maybe not right for you at that time or the right direction. So going back to that, you've already identified that reflection, that was the real beneficial part of you, to give that space where you get to see how inspirational you can be and how you can really go after the things with the excitement and the enthusiasm and the motivation that you've got for the growth. So then if I ask you, with your clients, how do you build that space for them?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So I'm really selective about who I work with. And it seems counterproductive when you're growing a business, but I think that was one of the biggest and fundamental shifts in the success that I had, is that I decided that I didn't want to work with people who weren't fully committed and invested in what it was that could happen. And so I was assessing, from my knowledge of rapport and psychology, whether or not I actually wanted to be working with the client that came to me. And that was very important to me, and it's remains one of the most important things. So not everybody qualifies to work with me. And therefore what you've already done is established an expectation, but also you know that your energy is in the right place with that client.
Yeah.
And that's really important. So for somebody who's looking for a coach, I would say red flags arise as soon as you feel that you are being persuaded into working with them. That is the biggest red flag for me. If you are not still, people who have chosen their coach will come to the call 90% of the time knowing that they want that person to be their coach or not. If you feel at any point in that conversation that you have, which is a mutual feeling out of whether or not we like this situation, the coach as much as the client, if the client feels at any point that they are being persuaded, that is a massive signal for
not the right place.
This is not the right place for you to be.
Yeah.
Because unless you are creating reasons for working with this person yourself, it's not going to be the right dynamic and the right situation for you to make progress. Everybody needs something different. So some people need someone to tell them what it is they need to do and need to be held to account. Some people need someone who's simply going to sit and listen. Some people need someone so this is what I need. I need to be able to step outside of my own head and look at what's going on without the emotion, the historical stuff. I need to look at me, and a coach that works with me knows that I need a bit of direction, but I need to be allowed to actually, without judgment, look at what I'm doing and what is working and what isn't working. And if we all did what we said we were going to do, and if we all did what you were talking about before, which is sitting down and spending time on our self-development, then we'd all be bloody brilliant.
Exactly, yes.
But we just don't. Yeah. And unless we spend the money on it, and sometimes it breaks my heart that society is like this, unless we make that investment, we don't show up. So I used to charge, oh my God, when I first started coaching, I was charging maybe 80 quid a session, which is not much. People would, it is a lot for some people, and I completely appreciate that, but those people who couldn't afford what I was doing, I would always support them in something like the membership or giving them access to some of my free support. But the value that was being placed, let's talk about free rather than £80 a session. If you offer free services, people don't value it. Yeah. You're the same person, but you are there and people go, well, I could go or I could not. It doesn't really matter. You're not emotionally, financially invested. Yeah. Now I charge a lot of money, but that's because I am able to justify the results from what I get with my clients, but also the people that turn up want to be there and they want to make a difference. So I'd say the second red flag, other than are you being persuaded, is can you actually afford it? Yeah. Because if you can't afford to be coached by this person up here, really ask yourself what the drivers or the motivation is for you working with that person. Because I personally don't want anyone ever to be in a situation where they are struggling to afford what it is that I have to offer. I take real issue with that. Yeah. So therefore I create something that is available to people who can't afford what I have to offer up here. So red flags, what you can afford, what the value is, and are you being persuaded by the person that you're sat in front of? Because that's a really good way of judging if you have money to spend on coaching, who you want to work with, for sure. I think. So then your sort of main clients then go through an application process, would you say, to be pre-qualified for the services? That way you get a better feel initially before you even engage on a journey. Okay, we're already a good fit for each other and you're looking for what I can actually provide. Absolutely. Yeah. So I spend a lot of time referring people who come to me to other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more, it's much better for me and for my clients for me to have one client who is fully invested in what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
than 12 clients who are paying a third of that who aren't particularly invested. And it just makes real logical sense to me to ensure that I want to work with the people that I'm working with. I created my own business. Why would I then just want to? But I'm not money driven. I'm not a money driven person. I'm a frustration driven person. So I want to make the world right. Yeah. So that is my driver. So I have a questionnaire. So if somebody books a call with me, they fill in a questionnaire which asks, what their frustrations are, what their role is, how much they earn, because I'm not taking money from people who really want to work with me but can't really afford what it is that I do. The top 3 priorities, whether or not they've had a coach before, and all of that information tells me A, which service I feel comfortable in offering them, and B, gets them to really think about what it is they want from a coaching journey before they even get to speak to me. So that's how it works.
And that's quite similar to the intake process that we've got here as well, to really try and gauge where they're at and really ultimately how you can serve people, because at the end of the day, like you said, for your business and for really your own mindset, you don't want to be serving people where you don't actually get the results that they're looking for, because it's a false service then, isn't it? And that's unfortunately, I think, what some people see in the coaching side of things, where it's turn up, spend your money, go away, and that's kind of it. Well, it's not really the service that we want to develop in the coaching industry, I believe, anyway. So given the red flags, right, so what to look out for, what would you say, or what do you see or think or believe that holds people back from engaging in a coach, even if they can afford it or even if they see the benefits? What would you say or believe holds people back from that?
Okay, and that is a really interesting question. So I'm going to try and pick up on 2 or 3 elements from that question. I'm going to write it down so that I stay on track.
Please
so
do.
what stops people engaging?
Mm-hmm. What holds them back?
So my ideal clients are women who are in the C-suite or board directorship level, who are either working towards that or have been there and are frustrated or want things to be better, or don't want to get to 70, 80, look back and go, why did I put all of that into this and not get something out of it for myself? And the difficulty and dynamic that these women have is that they are a very rare breed of individuals who have been tarnished in society. It's changing as dragon women who strive for success, who will step on other people to get to where they are. They're not always, but there's this real perception of judgment about a woman who is in a multi-billion company, at the very top of the board. Very rare to find, but does exist. And what those women have is the need to create a veneer of perfection. Because they are so judged, from what they wear to what they say, to whether or not they're emotional about things, whether or not they are supportive of other people, whether or not they have a family, how much time are they spending with it in their job compared to how much time they're spending at home. Everything is watched and analysed by other women as much as it is by the men that they work with.
Yeah.
So if that person then goes to, and it's quite widely accepted, so I have clients in Berlin and in California who it's the culture of coaching is quite widely accepted there. You know, you're not really worth your salt if you haven't got a coach. It's just normal. But working where we do in the UK, and I live in Northamptonshire, and I'm really keen to keep the expertise local, so that we're building women locally into these roles that are just you know, so important, is they don't want to ask for help because it shows a sign of weakness. So you're a woman in a really high profile job, there's this perception of what you've had to do to get there, and then staying there and staying sane and not, you know, bashing everybody's heads together because they're just not listening to you, and you're really frustrated and you're asking what's wrong with you, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen to men because it does, is it stops them from asking their male peers or counterparts for support. So what they end up doing is they end up reaching out for a coach personally rather than through the organisation. Sometimes, a lot of the time, where I live, and they don't want people to know that they've got a coach. Now that is something that stops them from engaging. Another thing that stops them is the perceived value. So again, where I'm from, this part of the country, you know, there's charlatanism that goes on in the coaching world. It has a really bad rep. A lot of coaches aren't qualified. They haven't done hours of supervision. They haven't studied. And I think it's a huge responsibility for a coach to do all of those things. And therefore, somebody who has hired a coach might have had a really bad experience and just been ripped off. And that would stop them from engaging. Or they haven't really got experience of knowing people who've had coaches who've made a massive success of their lives. So I think one of the reasons why I've been so successful is because it's been referral upon referral upon referral. I haven't had to do a lot of outreach because I've had success with the clients that I've worked with. So again, coming back to engaging with a coach, do your research, speak to people who've worked with that person, really get your due diligence done on who this person is and the actual benefits that they've brought to other people's lives. But unless you know that, you're not going to hire someone, or you're going to misinformedly hire someone, and it's not going to work. So for me, it's very specific to my clientele because they don't want this veneer of perfection to be eroded. But as well as that, it's the trust. It's the trust side of things.
Absolutely. And it's a big part of forming that relationship and safe space, that somebody can come into that place and be themselves and trust that they're going to get sound bounce off, sound reflection, and if it comes to advice, then sound advice on the steps that they could take to move forward. So, because one of the things that came up for our marketing survey was, you know, the significant amount of money associated with a coaching service. But then what would you say about the significance upon that transformation that you've seen, even with your clients or other people that you know have had a coach, or even you engaging in your coach? How would you compare that significant upfront investment cost in comparison to the significance of the transformation? Where does that sit?
Yeah, well, real life transformation is obviously priceless. You know, the happiness of living in a way that you are in alignment and you're living in congruence with your values and your beliefs, that's priceless. And we're so affected by societal norms and by what we should be doing and the ideal self that, you know, that to be free of that is, you can't put a price on that. But I would say, you know, you could buy a new Chanel handbag, or you could hire me for a few months, or you could go on holiday and you could have a great time and come back and be really, really well rested, or you could hire me for a few months. You know, it's all about perspective on the value. If you really want another Chanel handbag, that's fine. Not a problem. Go and buy another Chanel handbag. If you would prefer to go to the Maldives for 2 weeks, that's absolutely fine. But at some point, these people who actually are aspiring, will either just become very unhappy because the material goods are not cutting it anymore, and they'll end up getting a coach anyway, or they will realize the value in what it is that you're offering. And we talked about this before we started recording. It's, you know, there's something wrong if the person that wants to work with you doesn't see the value of what you're providing. They're not right for you if they don't see that value.
And they're not going to get any of the results that they're looking for.
No.
Which is more important, isn't it, really?
Generally, all coaches in the world now stop trying to work with people who don't really need to work with you right now. Yeah. Stop trying to persuade people to work with you. If people need your support, they will come to you. Put your value out there. Put your services out there. Let people know you're there. Don't be shying away and not talking about what you do. But stop trying to coerce people to work with you, because it doesn't make any sense. It's completely financially false. It won't work. Yeah. So it might for the short term, but it certainly won't for the long term. Yeah. Again, I've forgotten what you asked me, but
it's okay. You answered everything. Don't worry about it. So listen, just to start rounding up our call here. If someone was on the fence of, I mean, you spoke about due diligence and what to go out and look for, but if somebody was on the fence, say they'd been out looking at different people and they'd found a couple of people they were interested in, but they were really on the fence about getting a coach, what would you say to sum up?
I would say that they don't yet know why they need a coach. So they need to spend time talking to those prospective coaches that they've got to simply understand why they would want to work with them. And when the penny drops, when a coach asks you a question, and I don't believe you should hold anything back in your prospective calls. I don't think that, you know, any time you get to spend with a potential client where you could be helping them change their life, that's what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yesterday I had somebody who decided she didn't want to work with me. She was a prospect. We had our follow-up call and she decided it was too expensive. The value wasn't in it there for her. I served her for those 15 minutes. And I was like, right, what's going to happen between now and January? What needs to happen for you? I was not going to let her go with the priority being her new kitchen instead of her dealing with her life. So when you are deciding which coach you want to go with, there will be a coach that you speak to that asks you the question that is ringing in the back of your mind for a couple of weeks. That is the person that you need to work with. The person who has asked you something that is really still looping in the back of your mind. And in those prospect calls, when you're doing that interaction, that sales interaction, if you don't get that with them, if you don't get some kind of mirror being held up to what you're doing in your life, it might not be about them serving you. It might be more about them making money.
Yes.
That's what I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And last question for you. Thank you very much. What would you hope to get out of this interview, Lucienne, in sharing this conversation?
The charlatanism.
I don't mean for you, I mean in general.
The charlatanism within the coaching world needs to stop, because it's doing so many of us an injustice. And coaching, I believe, can be so fundamental in plugging the gaps that we have in society and in community as a whole. Because if we've got really successful coaches who have a bit more time to be able to serve the wider community, which is what I aim to do, then we have a system of people who understand others and can support. But if we have people who are coming in and exploiting others, there are plenty of other ways you can do that if that's what you want to do. If you want to exploit other people, don't use coaching as the measure for exploitation. Please leave it alone, because it can be such a powerful and transformative tool for so many of us. Yeah. So that's what I would say is my message.
I second your words, Lucienne, because it's been very powerful for me, hence the reason that I embraced this journey and getting into coaching and becoming certified, and really with a strong desire to help people really find balance holistically across their life, whether it's through business and relationships or family life, and then back into their career, however that looks, because that's what I needed. That's what started my journey, and that's what I found in a really good coach as well. Lucienne, I think you're an inspiration. We've not known each other for a long time. I do follow you. I think the topics that you bring up are really interesting, intriguing. I think that they provoke conversations that have to be held. I believe in personal responsibility and finding voice, mastering ourselves. Master you, then turn to help another is what I really believe in. I want to thank you very much, Lucienne, for your time. It's been a pleasure of mine asking you questions and listening. You've been a great sport, and I just want to let you know that I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thanks
for having me. Thank you.
We'll speak again soon. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.